working in the World Trade Center. It was like sitting and being on top of the world in New York City. It was the best.
9/11 destroyed that. Destroyed it.
It was get out or it was die.
And right then and there you knew our way of life was just over.
What do I do? I'm terrified. I can't sleep. I can't think.
She thought terrorists were in our backyard.
I went from being an executive for a large insurance company, high six-figure income, to being homeless.
Anything that she enjoyed had been ripped from her. And all she had left was what she remembered about God.
It was the beacon, it was the signature of the balance of Manhattan. It was the vision of Manhattan.
You know, the World Trade Center, it was New York to me.
It was a whole city in and of itself. There were 7 floors under the ground of malls and shops and businesses. You had almost every country in the world represented there.
I worked as a guide with the World Trade Center. People had no idea about the mall underground, how beautiful it was, how the free conscience was here. People would come around and just congregate just in front of the towers and look up and be mesmerized.
I loved the marble floors and the windows in the concourse. I loved the shopping. I loved the restaurants. I loved the shopping. Did I say shopping?
It was always the prerequisite visit. Whenever someone came to visit, you had to go to the World Trade Center. You had to go up to the World Trade Center. And I'd probably been up that thing 20 times. And in the summertime, you could always go down there and it was always a band or something going on.
Trained in there every day, and it was one of those, if you were anywhere in the city trying to get your bearings, you'd look up, side, there's the towers.
And they literally just went straight up into the sky. On half the days of the year, you could never see even the top of the World Trade Center because it would be above the cloud line.
I used to work in the 79th floor of One World Trade, and never liked working in that building. I always, you know, it's like when it's a cloudy day, the towers disappear. And it's like I'm waiting for God to walk by.
The people who worked there, they had a little bit of an attitude. And so it fit perfectly with what I wanted and what I thought success meant.
She was very young, too young to be headed to New York, too young to be out on her own. She had a rough young adult life. Spent a lot of time trying to find herself, running from who she ultimately was supposed to be.
I always known her to be a hardworking person, single parent raising my brother, Elliot, and myself.
If she wasn't home, then she was pretty much at work. And even when she was home, it was kind of zombie mode because of the work. Before 9/11, she was busy making money, you know, busy being important. A lot of pretending. She was more confident than she was spiritually, just out there, just lost.
My impression of her story is that her faith atrophied as her interest in the world expanded and the world rewarded her for that interest.
I think today most people have sort of a vague idea of faith or spirituality. But in a crisis, when it really comes down to either an external crisis or an internal crisis, it's not enough.
Attention all passengers. All bus service is being suspended until further notice.
Tower 1 just came down. It just came down. It's gone. It's all gone. This is unbelievable.
We gotta get them. They can't do this.
Let's just get home before killing anyone.
What? What did you say? Are you okay with all of this?
I don't know. I don't know.
Things are blowing up New York. We gotta do something.
I saw Tower 2 come down. Oh, it's just... Then it just...
We all saw it, lady! We gotta do something! This is war!
Let's just get home.
I was supposed to take pictures. You just can't believe it, you know.
Sheila was laying there on the floor. Her neck. Bleeding. Dead.
We killed him.
It's gone? What's gone?
Stacy, our building. Our tower. Your office. It's all gone. It's all gone.
Someone was going to be fired that day. Being a black woman, it meant I had to be a little tougher than most. And I went over to my assistant's desk to start the process, if you will. And just mid-sentence, just before I could even get a word in and get everything out, we heard and felt this undescribable boom. We heard it, we felt it, we saw it all at the same time. It was like sensory overload.
As I was typing away at my keyboard at 8:46, I heard this loud double explosion, a boom boom, if you like. The lights above me buzzed. I stood up wondering, what was that noise and why are my lights flickering? And my peripheral vision caught something behind me, and I spun around, and just 3 yards away was the glass up on the 84th floor. I looked toward the west, toward New Jersey, but right outside my window, against the glass, swirling flames. It's just sort of inexplicable. What the heck is that?
All of a sudden, there was this huge boom. The windows rattled, on our floor. I'm on the 49th floor. And we all thought that a boat blew up in the marina down below.
First thing I heard was a woman scream. I actually saw the first plane strike the towers, which brought me outside, and I saw the first tower was completely on fire.
And we went out there and you could see the gaping hole and just the flame, the smoke coming up.
We went outside and there was a bunch of debris and everything all over the street. So we come in, still weren't sure what happened. People started coming down, they evacuated some of the guys from World Trade Center, the commodity traders. So they were all in here drinking, 8:30 in the morning. So we put the TV on, we saw the hole in the building.
There was the explosion, and then there was the tilt, and then it just kind of stayed on a tilt, almost to the extreme, where I could feel my feet on a sort of a downward slant, just kind of standing there in front of the window, watching the huge pieces of debris fall outside the window and bang against the side of the window. I could see furniture and paper, and just in that instant, body parts all falling at the same time.
People had their noses pressed to the north windows immediately, looking up at an entire 93rd floor in flames. We knew very quickly that it could not have been just a small Cessna plane that caused that damage. We didn't know what it was.
People were panicked and running through. There was one man who kept saying the building's gonna fall. Because the way that it moved and the way that it didn't right itself, we knew something was wrong. There was never any question about the building going to fall. It was just a matter of when.
Watching the fire go across of those floors up there, I'm thinking to myself, the people above that floor are never going to get out. They used to teach us to evacuate up, and then they stopped the practice a long time ago. And I just kept thinking, how are you going to get out? How are you going to get out?
The building from the outside looked pretty much like it was standing, but from the inside it wasn't that way. From the inside there were sounds of explosions, there were fires crackling, and it was intense and it was hot, and we felt that the building never righted itself. There was blood, there was fuel, there was the smell of it, there was the screaming, there was the crying. We could actually hear people, I heard people trapped behind walls, elevator walls, or in other office. There were different points in the stairs where the smoke was more intense and the floor was more wet from the fuel or the blood or whatever. So we knew from the inside that it was get out or it was die.
As people got to that center core, a lot of people from other parts of our floor, because we occupied the entire floor, were already starting down the stairs. In retrospect, that was a very good thing. That meant that many people started evacuating right away.
And while we were watching it, we were also looking down, watching people evacuate out into the street. And my company told us not to evacuate. They didn't know what was going on, and they didn't know if they were going to be evacuating us into a situation.
We were already seeing shoots of fire coming through the ceiling panels. There was already some give.
The strobe lights on our floor flashed, the siren gave a whoop whoop, and the man who had conducted our fire safety drills over the years, familiar voice to me, his voice came over the public address system and said, "Your attention please, building 2 is secure. If you're in the midst of evacuation, you may use the re-entry doors and the elevators to return to your floor. Repeat, building 2 is secure." And he went through the announcement again. Well, I came out of my office thinking, oh, the pressure's off, you know, we don't have to evacuate. We don't have to evacuate.
Has anybody seen my purse? I was talking with Olivia. There was a big bang. They said it was an accident.
Are you kidding me? They flew a plane into the side of our building. They're killing us. Wake up, everybody! We have to fight!
Oh, who? Who are you going to fight?
The people who did this!
But who is that? Do you know? Where were you?
Tower 2, 31st floor. It started last week. Kept working after the first plane. We felt it, saw the smoke, but we thought...
You thought it was an accident?
Yeah, exactly. They told us to keep working. They told us. Guess they thought that was it.
It wasn't.
I know that. You think I don't know that? They're blading right above us. Jones! Jones flew out the window!
Yeah.
I remember pointing and I said, oh gee, look how low that plane is. And all my colleagues, you know, standing in the window, we all turned and looked to the right, and you could see it wound up being the United 175, and it literally came in, and you can hear it like when you hear a plane going down, and it tipped its wings, and it just was like, shoo. And we were actually waiting to see it pop out. It looked like it actually went between the World Trade Center and the Millennium Hotel. And then the next thing there was boom, and this ball of fire just exploded. The windows rattled, and it was just like we were all standing there, and it was one of those, everybody was like, get out, get out, get out. And it was like, you know when your feet are going and you're going nowhere?
Bobby had just come up the stairs, and he said, I was down the stairs a few flights, and I heard the announcement, so I came back. And he was just in the midst of telling me that when boom, boom, that double explosion again, and in an instant, our room, or the room, the west side trading floor that Bobby and I were standing in, just completely disintegrated. It's very, very hard to describe what happened in that half second. It was almost as if you'd given a demolition crew a week to destroy the floor. And it just happened in a split second. Everything came out of the ceiling tiles, of course, and the grid, and lighting, and speakers, and air conditioning ducts, just everything collapsed down on us. I remember walls tearing at a jagged angle, a door frame sort of fell out of the wall, and the air was immediately filled with this gritty, chalky, white construction dust.
When you see it on television, it's like watching a picture. Devastation and destruction. When you're watching it firsthand and watching this happen, there's another whole, like, what is going on? Yeah, it's like the world's just going crazy. You're thinking, are we next? You know, do I have to run for my life?
For 5 seconds, our building swayed one way to the west, very slowly. And whether this happened or not, I don't know, but the experience, the sensation, if you like, was that our building moved 6 to 8 feet. I know that sounds extraordinary, but I'm saying that was the sensation. And I thought, we're going over. And I remember my mind somehow protecting me, or thinking this crazy thought, what is it that I can grab onto to brace myself while the building falls over?
Suddenly there was the building moved again, and the door slammed shut, and the building kind of rocked again, and I could hear more. Sorry, I could hear more explosions, and I could hear more screaming, and we just kind of stopped. I think that was the point where the second plane had hit the building, and the door that we were leaving from slammed shut, and we were just kind of trapped there in the stairs.
There began to be pandemonium with sirens and what have you. There was a recall on all firefighters and all police officers. So all in the area, I was on the North Shore of Staten Island, and you got a great view of the downtown area from there. Everything that had a siren and lights on it started heading down towards the ferry and towards the city area.
Driving into Hoboken, you could see, all you saw were emergency response vehicles, undercover police cars, fire trucks. Everyone was rushing toward the Holland Tunnel.
I was taking pictures for Fashion Week. After the first plane, I went to get some shots. There was smoke and glass and people. Then I heard a plane. It was too low, but maybe I was trying to get a closer look, like another low flyer, and I kept waiting for it to pull up, and it just kept going. It just flew right into it. I could come up the other side.
Did you get any pictures? You were something, that's all.
What's your problem?
Nothing, I'm just asking. Where were you?
Durwood Insurance, 4507 Tower 1.
Did you guys get an alarm?
Nothing. My kids are gonna be worried.
There were ambulances flying, cops going. It was like debris. It was like paper was floating in the air. You saw people were leaning against the building, bloody. There, just ambulances running, paramedics, and it was like you stood there and you're kind of looking around, going, "What just happened?"
Kemper was on the 36th and 37th floor of Tower 1, and I don't think anybody had a plan to get out. It was just instinctive, almost primitive. It was just go with the flow of it. If people moved to the left, we moved to the left. Those stairs were crammed, and they were hot, and they were crowded.
So down we started. My flashlight was useful in the stairway. There was some reflector strips that they'd put on after the 93 bombing. We only went down 3 floors to the 81st floor when we were met with a heavy-set woman, an enormous lady, in a tent dress, laboring heavily, coming up the stairs, and she just blocked my way. No, you can't go down. She stopped me, and of course everybody just sort of went bump, bump, bump in behind me, and now we have this group of people on the landing on the 81st floor. And she said, "No, we got to go higher. And she was referring to the one person she was coming up the stairs with. We've just come off a floor in flames, and there's smoke, and we've got to go higher."
I think I was in those stairs all my life. We're walking down the stairs feeling like we're going to die. So any bit of hope, everybody grabbed onto it. I've heard people talk about how calm it was. I don't think it was. I think people were more in shock and more afraid. And there was no place to run. Where do you run? We're in stairs that are 2 feet by what feet? Where do you go?
And I have this very clear memory as I went through that crack, sort of sideways, of all my coworkers turning around and beginning to climb the stairs with the heavy-set lady. Bobby Call was on one of her elbows saying, "It's okay, lady, we're in this, we'll help you." Kevin York on the other elbow, "Yeah, we won't leave you, let's do this together," that sort of thing. And 2 or 3 steps up was David Vera, a coworker, fire safety team, carrying a walkie-talkie. Dave did a little pirouette about 3 steps up and started up the stairs with that group of people. And they all died that day.
I remember at one point in the stairs, it was so smoky, and it was so filled with smoke, and it was very wet. And someone from an office, one of the inner offices, was telling us that there was an explosion below and that we couldn't continue in those stairs. So people started to filter out of the stairs and take another route. And I remember it was sort of my turn to go into that, on that particular floor. And I remember looking in, and it looked like nothing had happened. The office was untouched. And I think it must have taken me too long to decide whether I was going to go in the office or continue down the stairs, because the crowd behind me started to push a little, and they pushed me further down the stairs.
And we made our way back with my flashlight to the stairs. And then I guess was the fateful moment. I shone the light down the stairs and I didn't see any flames. I just knew that I wanted to go down and investigate. And Stanley and I started down the stairs. About a floor later, we came across a bunch of debris. We started pulling it away, and slipping and sliding, we made our way through a tunnel of debris, if you like. On the 78th floor, the wall was cracked where we passed, and flames were sort of flickering up the other side. Not a roaring inferno, but I guess the flames were starved for oxygen inside the building. We made it past that and continued to dig until about the 74th floor. We came into what I consider to be normal conditions.
And there was a woman being led down the stairs by a fireman, and she was just kind of walking with her hands straight out in front of her like a robot. And the skin was just kind of hanging from her. She'd been burned pretty badly, and it was suddenly what we were most afraid of, that the whole death was staring right at us. We were confronted with mortality. At that point, there were gasps and there were tears, and I think that's when I started to hold my breath.
Stacy? Stacy! What is it? What'd you see? Are you okay?
I am. What was it? What was that? Is it a bomb?
No, it's not a bomb. It's okay. Just someone's upset is all. It's okay.
Cheering and happiness came up the stairs as the doors opened, and we started walking again.
We got to what's called the plaza level and looked out into the people area, almost a park area between the two towers that was normally beautiful flowers, a fountain, people coming and going, tourists, business people, vendors with their carts, a happy people place. Empty, abandoned, gray, looked like an abandoned archaeological site. We stared at it, surreal, for 30 seconds through sort of cracked glass windows.
Normally that concourse is full of life. It was full of people coming and going, and these amazing smells of New York food and coffees and everything, you know? To an hour later, the smell of fuel and burning hair, and nobody. It went from being alive to being dead.
Floor was packed. We come up to the roof a second time now, and you could see the hole in the south tower. It was pretty surreal. You really didn't know what was going on. So we went down, we got everybody out of the bar, and then decided before we left, we'll make sure that nothing's burning up here. There was a lot of debris and papers upstairs. So we were standing actually on the doorway to the rooftop when it started coming down.
And I said, there's no way, that's a steel structure. That's just furniture and drapery and carpeting that's burning. And I really didn't finish the sentence. It was like we were invited to watch. And way up at the top, you see the little wobble, and then boom, 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 boom as the floors of the upper floors start to pancake down. And it took 8 to 10 seconds for that entire tower to dissolve in front of us. Now, we could not see the bottom quarter of the tower. Trinity Church more or less blocked it. But Trinity Church protected us because that big wave of white guck that came out of the Trade Center site slammed into Trinity Church, almost like a wave hitting a seawall, and it exploded upward and over us.
We were running down a stairwell, and we thought this building was coming down when it came down. Pretty shooken up after that.
And just seeing that second tower, the South Tower fall burst. And then you see this big dust and debris comes out, flows out towards the river, just goes in all directions, just thinking, all the fire personnel, all the emergency personnel, they're dead, they're gone.
I was on the boat when the first tower came down. All it was just a pile and a big cloud of dark ash.
I was on the ferry. I'll never forget it. I remember the sound of it, and I remember the man that was standing in front of me, holding my shoulders, holding me steady, and telling me not to look back, not to turn around.
You heard the ground shake, and I remember it. A trickle of sweat ran down my back that I'll never forget. It was the coldest trickle of sweat, and I was never so scared in my life from that moment, seeing that building fall.
We set up, like every hospital on Jersey and New York did, awaiting thousands of patients that never came. And once the first tower went down, we called over and they were screaming for any kind of help or assistance. And that's when I made my way over to the World Trade Center.
God knows what was going on over there. When the South Tower fell, again, you didn't hear it. You just felt it. And right then and there, you knew our way of life was just over. Things were going to change that day and change for a very long time.
You couldn't imagine that we would be the target of anybody. Growing up in New York, growing up in America, you always had this feeling that we live in an impenetrable country and that nobody can come near us. And at that point, you still didn't believe that we were vulnerable in that way.
Knowing that they were innocent folks. Military people, when they sign up, they may go to war. They really didn't sign up for this. Who would have thought that they could experience something like this on their way to work? That's what really hit me hard that day.
The ferries were still working from the Winter Garden, and they were coming back with dust and dirt and all kinds of things on them. It was just horrible. They had this look of just shock. They've just been through the worst thing, hopefully they'll ever be through in their lives. And you could see it on their faces. They were like zombies almost.
They were covered in soot. Some people, had cuts and bandages, clothes torn. Other people, came crisp and clean like they went to work. But everybody just had that look of relief that they were able to get out of the city.
Attention all passengers. All bus service is being temporarily suspended until further notice.
Hey. Hey, you. What'd you see?
What? You don't believe me?
I just want to know.
You don't think I tried to help? Others got it too,
I know, I saw. Take it easy.
Just kept swaying like it was going over. And shaking and burning. Oh God, that smell. Gas and wires and hair. People. Couldn't breathe.
You got down the stairs?
What do you think, huh? Of course I took the stairs. Crowded as hell, too. People there burning and bleeding, and there's nothing I could have done. I'd have died. I tried. I did, I tried. I've got to get those bastards.
Yeah, sure.
I'll get them. What? What, you don't think I will?
No, of course. You bet.
I think you have to consider that we started that day. We dressed and we went to work. We put on our work attire and ended up in a war zone. There was nothing in our minds that prepared us for it. Nothing to tell us what was going to happen.
I was there, part of the rescue and recovery effort, and we started to hear the stories about what it was like inside the towers, and it was truly a living hell. They were burning alive, they were injured, they were cut off. I'm a firefighter as well, and when you get disoriented in just a small room by smoke, it's overwhelming. I couldn't imagine being that high up, totally cut off from the world. It had to have been the most lonely, desperate feeling they could have ever felt.
But my impression was there was almost a grief in surviving. You know, they made it out, but they were with people, they loved people, they were close to people. In some cases, the people would grieve the fact that somebody better than them, somebody they looked up to, died and they didn't. And that was a great burden.
She was saying those poor people, she kept saying. And then she described the floor of her office being askew and how they were directed to exit the building, and then people falling out of the windows and hitting the pavement all around her as she went out.
It seemed to me that her whole life up to that point had amounted to a couple of minutes worth of time, and then her experience in the towers was years and years and years.
And I thought about my mother. She'd get up on Saturday mornings and she'd get on her piano and she'd start playing music. And for a teenager, that was like torture. It's like the Saturday morning, the last thing you want to hear after a night of partying is your mother singing praise and worship music. But that was the first thing I remembered was my mother. And she used to sing this song, "Pass me not, O gentle Savior, hear my humble cry, while all others thou art calling, do not pass me by. Savior, Savior, hear my humble cry, while all others thou art calling, do not pass me by."
All she had left was what she remembered about God. So her early experiences of faith were now all she had. They were her heart. They were the only ground she had left to stand on.
I think that was the first time that I actually did really think that I wasn't going to see my son again. That I wasn't going to see my son again. That I wasn't going to go home. And I got so mad. I wish that I could say that when I thought about my mom and when I thought about that song, that I really cried out to God and that I remembered my faith. But I didn't. All I could think of was that somebody was going to have to tell him that his mom was gone. And I couldn't love that God that my father kept telling us about. I can honestly say that in my heart, in those moments when that door slammed shut and that smoke started to fill those stairs, I wondered what kind of God it was that would do something like that.
Usually when you're angry with somebody, you're trying to pull away. But I think 100% of the time, when people talk about anger with God over losing a loved one or something tragic happening, it's their attempt to draw closer to him.
'Cause at that time, I didn't think God was there anymore. You know, if he was there, why would he try to take her from me?
Looking back over at that skyline and not seeing that building forced me to see reality again. I had to think how frail life is and how short it is. In a matter of seconds, it can be over. And I was looking out the window at, for somebody, it was over. For me, it was over. I was still alive, but my life was over.
From the concourse? Are you okay?
You really want to know?
Yeah.
Why? Why so curious?
I don't know. I guess I can't believe this is all happening.
Yeah, well, something exploded.
Everything exploded.
Everyone will remember where they were.
I don't want to.
It was like a war.
I was in the concourse. In that coffee shop. That's how I knew Stacy. And I felt the shudder. And I just saw all the glass and concrete just fall. And then this water came rushing down. And it smelled like gas, but it looked like blood, you know? And I just got out of there. Almost got my head split open. And I saw this one man, and he was split right through.
Just before 9/11, I was God for me. I had no need in my life for religion or any form of it. No church, no Bible, no God. I didn't need that. I had my career, I had my mind.
Leslie relied on a self she created, I think a pretense of what she wanted to be.
I came to New York and hit the ground running, climbing the corporate ladder. That's what I wanted, that was my life.
9/11 destroyed that. Destroyed. And not in a subtle way, not in a kind way. She was, anything that she enjoyed had been ripped from her.
My intellect was my God. My ability to think strategically for operations and project management support and move a company forward. That was my God. I was so good at it. That's what I lost. I couldn't think. I couldn't speak anymore.
And so here she is. I was in control. And now I can't even control my thinking. I can't even control my emotional reactions. She was completely undone.
I lost track of everybody. Lydia, Sam, Brian. Did you see them?
Sorry, Stace, I don't know if I know them.
I think Brian, he was by the window. He was bleeding. That girl from accounting, I think she got into the elevator. They're screaming. Maybe it made it down.
They're dead. For every one of ours, I'm gonna get 10 of theirs. No one does this. I'm enlisting. You'll see.
Why? Why would someone? I was on a ferry. The towers collapsed.
Think that's smoke? Couldn't see a thing.
I know people in the towers.
Wake up, people. We all did.
So we're all outside waiting, and my cousin, he actually was a teacher there, him and his wife. And I'm trying to find him, and I'm like, what's going on? Did you see the news? Because he also was a social studies teacher, so, you know, he would have known. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to call Leslie's cell phone, but I can't get through. Something's going on, so we'll get in contact with her later. And later felt like forever, like it never really came.
When I walked into the control center, it was just mayhem. Phones were ringing. We had employees that were crying. They wanted to use the phone to call their loved ones. You know, they didn't know what was going on.
At home, I told my wife at 5 to 9, turn on the television. Something's happened next door, we're okay. 8 minutes later, right where I telephoned from, boom, she saw our offices get hit pretty hard by the flames, the explosion, the plane. So at home, our house had filled up with people wondering, you know, how's Brian doing, that sort of thing. Well, when I made that phone call at 9:30, there was great celebration that I was okay and on the 31st floor. When I put down the phone, my wife turned to the room full of people and announced, Brian's okay. He's got a great story to tell us about some stranger he's met. He'll be out of the building in 2 hours. Now, I never said that, but she remembered that in the '93 bombing, when our office had been on the 31st floor, it took 2 hours to get out of the building. So this was the assumption she made. Our building collapsed 25 minutes later. So at home, when everybody's expecting Brian to be out of the building in 2 hours, it collapsed 25 minutes later. And of course now, home is not a happy place to be. Brian is gone.
And I'm getting mad, like, why is she calling? You know, she has family. Why don't you call your family to tell us that you're okay, that, you know, you're gonna be all right, not to worry about you. And after that, Elliot comes off his bus, and they're like, don't say anything to him because he's gonna take it really hard. And we're watching, and he comes in and he's like, what's going on, everybody?
Nobody was really saying anything. It was pretty quiet, and nobody would really look at me. So I was like, all right, you guys are weird. And my cousin pulled me aside. He was like, you know, we're here for you, and if you need anything, you feel free to play the game. And I was like, play the game? You know, my cousin never lets me play his game, so he's letting me play the game. They're huddled around the TV. My friends are acting weird. School's canceled. And that's when I kind of got the sense that there was something bigger than what everybody was telling me.
I didn't want to look too much at him because he knows me better than anybody. And if he sees me crying, he knows that there's something wrong.
But I mean, it's your sister, it's your big sister. You come home, she's crying. It might have been some boy or something, you know? So it still didn't really hit me.
And I remember my cousin said, did you hear about your mom? And he goes, what are you talking about? And he says, well, you didn't hear that it was her building that was attacked. And I think he ran upstairs or ran outside the door. And I just was heartbroken. You know, how do I help him? How do I comfort my brother? You know, how do I be his sister, his best friend? Do I have to be his mom? You know, do I have to take on responsibilities? I'm 16 or 17 years old. You know, this is my time, high school, you know, supposed to be young and free. How do I take on the responsibilities of a household? I'm not ready.
And they would get on the train and just go, and just thank God that they were on the train. And then everyone started talking about, well, where's Bob? Where's Carol? You know, people they usually sit with, like when you talk to other people, they usually sit together. And that's when everyone started worrying.
But I also had a lot of family and friends still in the fire department. I knew the fire department for me was very close to my heart because I knew they were going to be probably the ones going up while the people that can get out.
I dialed home. Now, statistically, I probably should have got a busy signal because at home I know our phone was just ringing off the hook. I learned that later because it went on for days. But it was exactly that moment that my wife came in to our kitchen after being outside pacing for an hour and 15 minutes with some girlfriends of hers. She came into the kitchen, she passed the phone as it rang on my first attempt to get home. And I said, oblivious to any pain they were going through at home, I said, hi honey, it's me, you know, something casual like that. And she collapsed on the floor. I never really did talk to her. A friend picked it up and he said, who's this? I said, well, who's this? You know, what's a man doing in my house? You know, he said, like, I wasn't making any sense. I didn't conceive what was going on. And he said, it's Dave. I said, well, hi, Dave.
You know, they kept saying the phone lines were all tied up. Don't come, don't call. And I don't know, it was just a miracle, I think, that I dialed the number and I actually got through on the first try. She sounded shaken, not hysterical, just shaken. But there was a sense that this was something major, something bigger, that was happening.
We all went from my grandma's house to her house, and when we walked in, and the neighbor Nancy, she was like another grandma to us. She lived next door, and she was holding her, and she was shaking, and you can smell her. She smelled like oil or gas or something, you know, and she'd already had her clothes off, you know, maybe pajamas or something like that, but you could still smell. She was shaking up.
When I first seen her, she was crying, and she was so emotional, and the whole family was kind of trying to talk to her and ask her if she was okay and all of that.
She hugged us and said that she was so sorry, you know, she's really sorry. And my grandma was there and was like, why are you sorry? What did you do? And she said, you know, I couldn't stop it. I couldn't help them. You know, I tried. I'm really sorry. And just broke down, and we just cried. You know, we were happy she was home, but it was different. It was, you know, just looking at her, she didn't look like the same person. She looked like someone who was beaten down, you know, just broken spirits and everything.
I could see that she was trying to be strong for us, you know. She wanted us to know everything was all right, but at the same time, she's always raised me to be logical and just look at things outside the box a little bit. So in the back of my mind, I was thinking about, like, all right, you don't have a job to go to, you know? We don't have our father around. So, like, the bills, you know, like the lights, cable, clothes, and I'm entering high school next year, you know, so I was thinking, like, how our life was gonna change.
Elliot was very young when all this happened, and really still forming his identity. And so I knew that in my mind, and I've said this, I think his journey's longer. I think he's, in some ways, has more to work out, because his whole idea of what life is, who he is, he didn't really get a chance to form any of that. It was formed for him through 9/11 and through watching his mom.
And he was going through his own crisis of having nearly lost his mother. And really, for all practical purposes, he really did lose his mother for a while, emotionally, mentally, and never really got her fully back from what she was before.
Between me and my sister, we were just more trying to figure out how we were gonna make things easier on her. I think that was the year that I started doing my laundry and cleaning up around the house. I started grocery shopping, checking the mail for bills, and trying to keep a tally on what's coming up and stuff. My sister stepped up with the dishes and cleaning around, so I think that was like my last year of childhood.
Somebody would've told me I'd cry. Matter of fact, I'll guide you on a little journey to Oz with the twist. Something similar to horror arises on the gorgeous 9/11 sunny day in the sky. It's a bird, better yet it's a plane. Watch it fly, oh my God. Not to use his name in vain, but like honestly, I'm glued to the news, feeling lost, conflicted. I don't wanna know why, just the cause. I mean what? I ain't even in high school or nothing. I ain't even get to tell you about this girl I've been seeing how it doesn't matter. Now I feel it matters more. I lost my mother that day on the 36th floor. I see the president talking about terrorists and war, and of course the way I'm feeling got my ready support. I call on God, tell him that I'm ready to die. Open my eyes to a vision of my mother through the door. Like, will I die alone? Lord, they say the world's so cold. I pray that I can stay strong. Some days I feel I'm losing my...
Did you see them all going in?
The cops and the firemen, right? Just doing their jobs.
I should have got pictures.
How many of them do you think died?
Give it a rest, will you?
New York's finest.
They kept passing me on the stairs, telling us not to panic, keep moving forward.
I saw this guy carry a woman down, and her skin was all burnt and black and peeling.
They could have gotten out before. You know.
We gotta get him.
This is crazy.
There were dozens of buildings that were threatening collapse, fires everywhere, non-stop explosions from vehicles to buildings to fuel tanks, and it literally looked like a nuclear war that was still in play.
People ask me all the time where God was that day, you know? And I saw, looking back, I saw God in ordinary people who were helping one another.
The only person Stanley and I passed on the stairway in our entire descent that day was on the 68th floor. Walking up the stairs was a co-worker of mine, also on our fire safety team, Jose Marrero. Jose's walking up, and I said, Jose, what are you doing? Where are you going? He said, I can hear Dave Vera up above on the walkie-talkie. He's helping people. I'm going up to help him. And I said, well, I'm getting this guy from Fuji Bank out. He said, I'll be fine. He said, I'm okay. Up he went. Jose's about 32 years old at the time, physically fit, great guy, big, happy-go-lucky, smiley guy, everybody's friend. Everybody loved Jose. So up he went, and Jose died that day. I mean, to me, he's the true hero.
Electrician who ran inside the building to get people out who lost his life here. A maintenance guy who went in 4 and 5 different times, getting people out into the second tower to fall, which is the first tower struck.
There was smoke, you couldn't really see, there were people that were bloody all over the place. And as I identified myself, everyone I encountered kept saying the same mantra, even though they were badly injured, you gotta go in there. My friends are back there, my coworkers or whoever. And it was really the most selfless that I'd ever seen.
I saw what they were doing. I saw them making a decision. I saw some of them with tears in their eyes, making the decision to go up those stairs. Once, the thing is, I think those that I saw knew that they were not coming back down, and they made the decision to be brave and to be heroes and to help people out and sacrifice their own lives to do it.
But after the second plane hit, and they were still going up, they knew in the back of their minds, I'm sure, that doom was ahead of them.
That was the communication headquarters. It was fully involved on fire. They knew that it was going to collapse, but everybody who was there knew they were the final lifeline to anybody who might get to a radio or phone and get to them. And they stayed up until the last moments of that building collapsed, refusing to evacuate, even though they were mandated to do so.
The miracle, there were so many. For me, it was the man on the stairs, the man who was holding the door. He put his hand on my shoulder and he kind of squeezed a little bit on my shoulder. And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "You're gonna be all right." I wanted to stay there with him because there was such a peace about him. There was such a calm about him. And believe me when I tell you, he was the only person smiling who looked pleasant. I stood there with him and he told me, "You can't stay here, it's not safe." And he kind of nudged me along and I went out onto the concourse, and when I turned back, he wasn't there anymore. I know in my heart it was an angel.
The miracle of surviving. You know, she didn't go this way, she went that way. She instead of being in a hallway and being 1 foot this way, because that suddenly was enveloped in flames, she was this way, and somehow she knew.
As we got to that center intersection, I had a choice. I could turn right to stairway C, I could go ahead to stairway B, or I could turn left to stairway A. And I remember this sensation, which is inexplicable to me, that there was this push on my right shoulder as I got to the intersection, and it pushed me around to the left to stairway A. And my intention had been to turn right to go to stairway C, because as one of the fire marshals on our floor, that stairway C that I knew was my responsibility. But nonetheless, this push on my shoulder, and there was nobody there, sent me around to stairway A. And I started down stairway A. And I can tell you that there are no stories like mine of anybody coming down stairway C or B. Just my story and a few other people who got out of stairway A.
I mean, I've heard her tell the story, and every once in a while there'll be a new miracle that comes up, and I'm like, Leslie, I didn't hear that one before. Or a new facet, you know, it's like, oh, okay. And I've heard this thing, you know, dozens of times. And each time it points back to a God who is faithful.
Their story really was a miraculous story because they were walking a woman down who was an elderly woman, and right around, I believe it was the 6th to 8th floor, she said she couldn't go on any further. She said, really, you guys are young, you have your whole life ahead of you. Please leave us. And I'm good with it, but I can't go another step. And they decided, each one, I'll stay with her and the rest of you go. And this argument continued to the point where they all decided we're staying. And we die with this woman. And their last act of courage was to shield her body so she would be the last one impacted with their bodies. And they stood there and they protected her from what they thought to be the imploding building. Because of that decision, they actually saved their own lives, because if they had gone forward, they would have been killed in the collapse. The only area of both towers that remained intact was that stairwell between those 2 floors. So that act to give up their lives to care for another is literally what saved their lives.
I believe there are angels there for me, and I believe there are angels there for those who did not make it out of the building. I believe, I know that God is a God of comfort, and that He comforted those who did not make it out of that building, just even more than He comforted me.
When a firefighter goes down, we have alarms so that if you go horizontal and it doesn't move for X number of seconds, it lets out this loud chirp. And that day, that's what echoed around this entire area. It was dead silent, but for hundreds of chirps like that. And to this day, there's a bird by my house that chirps exactly like that. And every time I hear it, it just puts the hair up on my arm, because it immediately, viscerally takes me back to that day and knowing that somebody's losing their life.
I had broken down from the emotion of seeing the devastation, and to see the firefighters and the police officers walking around like in shock.
I just saw a giant, twisted, smoking pile with probably the greatest bunch of men I'm ever going to see working constructively together to bucket by bucket reduce the pile and get to people who may be okay, and get to people who deserve to be home with their families.
I just whistled for 10 guys. Before the whistle was done, there was 10 guys there. You know, everybody wanted to do something.
People handing out new boots and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and you name it. And you know, the cheerleaders, when you got off the ferry and there were people standing there who knew that you were going to make the trek to what I'll refer to as hell, they supported you by saying, you know, God bless America, and the things that you needed to hear that just kind of bolstered your purpose.
To see our country in front of our eyes pulling together was an amazing good that came out of something so evil. A lot of gratitude for me. I seen homeless people helping people. You know, I seen major companies like Home Depot and McDonald's turning out within hours, within minutes, and unfolding their trailers. They weren't set up for this, but they got set up for it. And all those orange buckets. You know, this is not a Home Depot commercial, but the fact is that we needed those buckets. You know, I seen guys tagging body parts, putting them. I myself did, putting them in those buckets. You know, people bringing their dogs down to see if they can try to help.
We brought our blazers out, and I remember a girl I knew from, I think it's from Oradell, 5 foot tall, 100 pounds, dripping wet, I mean, she was. And I gave her my 52 long coat, and she put it on, and she looked at me, and I looked at her, and it was just so wacky, so absurd that we just both started laughing, because she looked like a little kid in her father's jacket.
You know, as I went up the Morris-and-Essex line, each station, I saw, you know, their little medic stations set up. Hospitals had set some stations up. volunteers, police, firemen, they all had their little stations if people needed first aid. It was a bad day, but it was great to see, once again, Americans come together. And you could see it already get set up.
You okay? I think you're cut.
It's not mine. I think I got hit by somebody.
It was spattered all over the concourse. Everywhere. Do you think they jumped?
Nobody jumped. What are you, an idiot? No way. Not from there.
They did. I saw them. They were jumping. It was awful.
I saw them too. At first I thought it was chairs and furniture and stuff, but it was people. One right after another too. I could have served them.
Give me a break. How do you know, huh? How do you know they jumped?
Mm-hmm. Not so curious now, huh?
No way. No way somebody jumped. No, I would have done something.
Yeah? Like what?
I don't know. Something.
Sure. And that's what they did. Something.
I went from being stuck in a stairs, thinking that I was going to die, to wandering around in an area where there were dead bodies and broken bodies that reinforced for me that there's no rhyme or reason to me still walking around.
She was particularly focused on some of the scenes she had seen as she was exiting the World Trade Center building, particularly bodies falling out of the windows and hitting the ground all around her. By now we're all familiar with the scenes of the World Trade Center and the smoke coming out of the buildings and the flames, but we never really saw what those people on site saw, and it was pretty gruesome.
In the first hour or so, maybe it was longer, of our meeting, we were in the towers together. I was running down the stairs with her. I could hear the screams. I could hear the building coming apart. I could see the parts of bodies falling.
I saw someone die in the middle of her sentence. I remember what it sounded like to hear her take her last breath.
I hope you never witness something like that. I hope no one ever witnesses that again.
I remember a lady holding hands with someone, and I remember his blue shirt, the way the wind caught his shirt, and the tumble, the way that they tumbled in the air. They started out holding hands and then kind of broke hands.
The thing that really stood out in my mind was the people jumping. When I think back, and your decision is, how am I gonna die? Am I gonna burn to death, or am I gonna jump to death? But the answer was death. And I can't even imagine what somebody would think, what's running through their minds at that point in time.
Nobody knows. Unless you were there, unless you smelled those bodies burning, unless you heard people screaming because they were burned alive, and you knew that death was coming for you, you'll never be able to understand that choice. If I had a place to run outside of those stairs, and that had been my choice, I think I might have made the same choice.
After 9/11, she was a mess for a while. And it's probably not a clinical term, but she was a mess for a while emotionally.
I was committed to a psychiatric hospital the following day. I think looking back, at some point through all of this, I suffered a nervous breakdown. I lost my mind. I was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So I have very active triggers. By that I mean, if you've heard of shell-shocked, or loud sounds will cause me to react. I'll run, or I'll hide, or I'll start weeping from smells. I can't stand the sound of airplanes. They really, literally make me want to come out of my skin. So on occasion, explosions, firecrackers, I pull at my skin.
That's common in post-traumatic stress syndrome, a reliving of the traumatic events, and nightmares are a big part of having post-traumatic stress disorder.
I couldn't manage my finances. I couldn't leave the house. I boarded my windows to my home, wouldn't let my children leave at first. I thought the Taliban was living in my shed in my backyard. I was afraid of my pool. I couldn't go in the basement. I couldn't go in small, dark corners. I was afraid of sound. I couldn't leave my house. That was my reality. I started sleeping with weapons near my bed when I could go to sleep. The doctors just pumped me with more and more drugs to try to help me cope, because my everyday was 9/11.
You could see it just affecting her psyche, and she would run back into her room. To her, it was like the terrorists were after her, or they were after our family.
Everything was dark in her room. Everything, there was no kind of light. She didn't want to keep the doors open. Any kind of sound that you made, frightened her. If you talked loud, she got really scared.
Her presenting challenge was, what do I do now? What do I do? I'm terrified, I can't sleep, I can't think. By all measure, I'm insane. This thing has made me crazy. And I need help. I don't need a little help, I need help across the board. And so she was in panic mode.
She's always really concerned about Elliot, her son, what happens to him if she's able to regain control emotionally and see him through to adulthood.
Every Friday night was our pizza night, so we'd have movies and pizza together, just the three of us, and we loved it. 9/11 took that from us. I couldn't sit in a room and watch movies with them. I couldn't bear to be around them most of the time. I couldn't bear to be touched anymore. So they couldn't cuddle with me.
She was always the person that I was able to turn to, so who do I look to for help? She would cry, and then my brother would cry, and he didn't want to leave the room. But, bills still had to be paid, so, I asked her, how do we do this, help me, help you. So she showed me how to start, paying these bills and paying that bills. And before I know it, I'm cooking dinner, and it would sit there. She wouldn't come out the room. My brother would eat in his room, and dinner time was usually like the fun time for us. That was the time we got to see her when she got out of work. So no one would come to the table anymore. It was just sit there and get cold.
You can't imagine that two children who are just now thrown into adulthood, they lost their teenage years.
And no one ever says, what about the victim or the survivor's family? Because we might ourselves not have the same symptoms, or I might not have post-traumatic stress disorder, or I might not be afraid to drive across a bridge or, something like that. But we all have a different type of disease that we were affected by, that day.
It's been a journey. What happened after that? So much. I went from being an executive for a large insurance company, high six-figure income, to being homeless.
This is ridiculous. They need to get us home.
They're worried about other attacks.
It's late for that now. Not anymore. From now on, I act. I'd rather die. No. It'll be different now.
Do you mind?
So one of the first questions we would ask is, what floor did they work on? And as soon as they told us it was the 80th, 82nd, I looked at them and started thinking, you know, they don't have a father. You know, she just lost a husband. And this started with literally hundreds of people now doing the same thing over the course of the next 12 hours. And it really was probably one of the hardest things I'd ever done in my life.
Right in Staten Island area, we lost close to 300 people. And, you know, as the days went on, you'd hear, well, so-and-so, I don't know if you know, but so-and-so died. You know, I lost a lot of classmates. You can't drive 2 blocks in my neighborhood without seeing a memorial street sign for someone else who perished.
The phone would ring. I'd get, for days, I would get a phone call from somebody I didn't know in Denver. Mr. Clark, I understand, you know, you worked at the World Trade Center. I'm the uncle of, you know, Susie whatever. Do you know if Susie's okay? Did you see Susie? That, all those things. I would tell them what I knew. I wouldn't exaggerate. I wouldn't tell them my long story. I'd just begin to tell them a little bit of the color so they could begin to fill in for themselves what might have happened.
The next day, a buddy of mine brought me down here into the building. And that's when it really hit home, when you saw all these buildings just torn apart. That was frightening.
People were angry, they were upset, they were hurt. I mean, it was just a whole array of negative emotions going home because we were violated. In all honesty, this is the, you know, most horrific thing that happened on U.S. shores. You know, and there were innocent people in there. There were children in there.
I remember opening my mouth and hearing someone scream. I heard someone scream the most horrible, painful, dreadful sound I'd ever heard. It was ugly. It was an ugly sound. And then I felt my knees hit the pavement, my driveway, and I realized it was me screaming.
I became very angry and very bitter. It wasn't that I was mad at her, but I was, because she wasn't the person that I knew. I didn't know how to communicate with her. I didn't know how to communicate with anybody anymore. So myself, I shut down, and I started hanging out with the wrong crowd of people. I didn't want to get too close to people because I didn't want to lose anyone. And I got into a lot of trouble.
The night they collapsed it hit me hard, you know, it just hit me. It just was, they're gone, you know, it's a memory. It's like part of the landscape, part of the family. It was just ours. They took it from us.
To me, that was my landmark for New York City. And to see him gone, still to this day, it affects me. You know, there's a little hollowness inside of me.
I cried for a while, and I remember I got so mad, and I didn't know who to get mad at. Like a lot of the people on the trains, you wanted to be mad at somebody.
This can never happen again. This is not something we can tolerate. We cannot tolerate this type of behavior. Attacks on, these aren't people wearing uniforms. These are people that were going to work, make a living, take care of their families.
Just going by house, and I saw all these TVs, and they all seemed to be tuned to the same channel, watching the planes crash into the tower. And I could just see the TVs in the windows, and sometimes people just standing outside. And that's when it started to become real for me. It's like, okay, we can never go back.
We all had been through this horrific day together. We all knew the 61 people that we had lost. And so as we comforted each other, we were able to heal. And I mean, to me, that's a beautiful thing.
My back door opened to my home, and I looked over, and I saw my son coming through the door. He was so little. He had his arms out. He was just kind of walking over to me with his arms out. His sister was behind him. She looked a hot mess. It was the best thing I ever saw in my life.
I let her know that she didn't have to be okay. She didn't have to have it all figured out. Today, tonight, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, maybe in the term of her natural life. She didn't have to put all the pieces back together. That's not her responsibility. That's not her burden. Be free of that.
Losing 61 coworkers, is a huge impact. I mean, it changes you. It changes your outlook on life and the value of life and the nearness of death, the reality of death.
She showed me the notebook, which had all the detail of everything that she was describing, and I encouraged her there. I said, I like this. This is great. Your experiences could lead to a book.
You don't forget these people, but you have to understand too, your life does go on.
Everybody, wherever they were, they're in Madrid or they're in Hong Kong or they're a mile from the Trade Center, they all experienced that day a certain way. Everybody different, but their story is valid.
Hey, are you okay? Do you have anyone waiting for you?
No.
It's gonna be all right. Look, here's my number. My cell phone's on there. If you need anything at all, give me a call.
Attention all passengers. We are resuming limited service. Please report any suspicious activity or packages around you immediately. God bless.
For her, 9/11 was a wake-up call to get back to who she was supposed to be.
Her focus after 9/11 was her family. Because she came so close to losing us, I think for the first time she took a step back and realized, like, all right, we were kind of trading our happiness for corporate America's version of happiness.
I became homeless. I lost my car. I sold things to eat. But it was all good because there was a different purpose. There was a different life being built.
I could say there was 3 different Leslies. Before 9/11, she was the best friend, the one who was more of my confidant. She knew me without even me telling her anything. She already knew what I was thinking. And once 9/11 came, it was, who is this woman? Why would she betray me? What kind of friend would abandon me? The Leslie that I see today is the person that I want to be. She's so strong. She helps me one day at a time. I'm inspired by her, and I don't know if I tell her often enough, but she's always been an inspiration to me.
My Elliot came in my room one morning. It was about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and my hair was a hot mess, and I was a mess. I don't even think I brushed my teeth that day, changed my clothes, but he came in and he sat on the side of my bed and he said, "Mom, are you ready?" And I said, "Am I ready for what?" He said, "Are you ready to receive Jesus Christ as your personal Savior?" I think I wanted to kill him in that moment. Here he was, this little guy with this huge truth that there was nothing bigger than 9/11 for me except God.
In any tragedy, in any crisis, I think the thing to remember is that God is still present. He doesn't He doesn't move, he doesn't change. He's still the same faithful God that he's always been. He loves us in the middle of our messes, even when we make them or when other people make them.
Through tragedy, through loss of life, I believe her fiance, through losing her job, her career, has just clawed her way back, like as if she climbed to the top of those 110 stories.
I am working with women and children who are homeless and victims of domestic violence. I work with people who are struggling through depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's all about hope.
She's an example to anybody with PTSD of how you can recover from it. It's not hopeless.
My life was over, yes. My life was in fact over, and a new life started for me. I got up the next day and my life was still a mess, but my life was a mess with hope.
Because there's no promise of a perfect life. There's no promise of a tragedy-free life. And especially people of faith, they think, you know what, now that I'm with Jesus, everything's going to be sunshiny and brand new. Well, hold on, isn't that a cross hanging up there in the middle of the church? How did that work out?
Everybody goes through something, and everything happens for a reason. If it wasn't for 9/11, you know, a lot of things wouldn't have happened. My mom found Jesus again. You know, she became a born-again Christian and refound her faith. A lot of my family, because of that, they started going back to church. You know, a lot of friends who heard our story and they started helping out.
The only way that someone's going to understand that God can move their mountain is to see the mountain that he's moved for me. And if he's moved mine, he can move somebody else's.
When you have somebody like Leslie, you don't have to be convinced that God helps people. You know, there she is. Aha, God does help people. God can help me.